Testing, 1, 2, 3. Hopefully this sounds okay coming across. Shows that I have sound, so we'll use that for now, unless otherwise instructed to. So, well, good afternoon, folks. My name is Kerry. You're watching Prophecy Montana. We've got something that I would like to discuss tonight, namely the Michigan Conference and some of the latest developments that's been taking place over there in Bering Springs, Michigan. Now, we've all heard by now, I'm sure, of the Conrad Vine and the Patrick Kelly, riff that's been kind of going through this church. And Kevin, hello, how you doing? Nice to have you here. Dallas had sent me earlier. Now, you guys probably know Dallas from the Sabbath School and the Prophecy Updates. He sent me several articles on this subject. We're going to start to read one of the articles. We're going to go through some of the finer points of it and just kind of discuss this in at least some detail, because I think this is an important subject, mainly because of all of the division that this has, caused recently in the church. And I find that division very upsetting. Now, if the division was over right and wrong, or black and white, that would be different. You know what I'm saying? If something is very cut and dry, then I can see it. But this is a little muddier than that. There's a little bit more to the story. There's a little bit more at stake. It's almost like the policies between the left and the right, it's a lot like the COVID, right? And the vaccines, to vax, to not vax, to wear a mask, to not wear a mask. These were all divisive things that crept into the church that I don't think had any place ever being in the church. And that's part of what's going on again. Now, Satan's a master at division. We've seen what he did in Dallas. Hey, how's it going, Dallas? My phone is ready for a phone call. You can call anytime, and Aaron's promised to at least pop in at least once tonight too. So we can see how that's all going to work. I'm going to need my headset to be able to catch these phone calls. I will have a phone number that will be present, or at least available to the public. It'll be like a temporary phone number that I'll give out. Hopefully by next week I'll have that up and running, where some of the viewers can call in and put their comments as well. But so these divisions, I think, shouldn't be happening. There's something that the devil has cooked up under these devices of right and wrong, and I don't know if it's personally something that we should be following. I don't think it's something that we should be joining in on, if you will. It's not a fight that we should be. It's not a hill that we should be dying on. Now, there are considerations on both sides of the aisle to consider, and we're going to talk about some of that here in a second. And I was just saying earlier, Dallas, if you didn't catch it, I was going to be reading one of those articles that you had sent me, and I read, let me see here, let me pull up this link. Now, Dallas had sent me 3 of these articles, and the one from Spectrum seemed like a pretty good argument. Not argument. It was just basically the two sides of what is actually taking place. Now, in a packed and emotionally charged town hall, I'm just starting from the top of the article here, and then we'll skip down through these. In a packed and emotionally charged town hall meeting in the Village Seventh-day Adventist Church on Sunday, hang on. Just had my glasses. What did I do with them? Put them on my head. No. All right. December 8th, the Michigan Conference disclosed that the decision to remove Ron Kelly as the church's senior pastor was passed by the executive committee with a vote of 11-4. The removal of Kelly, publicly announced by Kelly via the church's YouTube channel on December 4th, added gas to the growing ideological fire among mostly theological Orthodox Adventists, fueled by tensions around vaccine mandates, public health, conscience, governance, charisma, and demagoguery. All right, so those were some of the issues that helped make the decision between this panel, and I'm a little confused because first of all, and maybe you guys could help me out here, but the executive committee, what branch does that really compose? As far as apparently they're the deciding factor in all of the happenings in the church, and to many of the members' dismay, Patrick Kelly was removed from the Bering Springs Church there. And it goes on to say, on December 17th, Cody Francis, the Michigan Conference Ministerial Director, delivered the official announcement during the church's service. He stated that the decision to transition Kelly was made after much deliberation and prayer, and emphasized the church conference's desire to follow God's leading. The announcement then named Pastor Tariq Patel as interim senior pastor, so he's going to be taking Patrick Kelly's place. Now, I like Pastor Kelly, and I've listened to a lot of his sermons, and I've listened to Conrad Vine. Conrad Vine over the years has helped me with several things that I had struggled with at the time, just trying to make decisions on different things. And so, it's kind of sad to see these pastors go in this fashion. And Kevin says, isn't Spectrum a more liberal publication? Possibly. I didn't catch like a whole lot of negativity towards the author of this. Let me see. The author of this article is maybe you know him. Stanton Witherspoon is a Spectrum correspondent and multimedia journalist residing in Bering Springs, Michigan. He is from Gardnersville, Liberia, and graduated with a degree in theology from Valley View University in Ghana, and attended African Digital Media Institute in Nairobi, Kenya. Okay, so that's just a little background on the author of the article. But I did think the article was fair because it didn't really seem to take sides as much as it just pointed out what was actually taking place, and that's something I appreciated about the article. And but I do have my own opinions on what's going on, and the more I read into this, the stronger my opinion gets. And it's an opinion that probably a lot of, maybe even my listeners would disagree with. Maybe some would agree with it. But what I want to emphasize is that it's not so much important what I think is right and wrong. It's important what the Bible says is right and wrong. And that's going to be the theme of tonight's kind of talk, because when we look at the Bible and the direction of the Bible that it gives us, we see a specific direction that God is leading his people amidst the chaos and the confusion. And it was likened unto, now, you guys have seen Aaron, the Big Sky Argonauts, on the show as well. And he put a perspective, and he opposes my perspective on things, but to be able to relate to me, or to show me that he relates to what my position is, he did say, well, it's kind of like living in America, right? You live in America, there's all of these things that are going on, right? There's all of these things that we disagree with, but we wouldn't stop being American necessarily, would we? I mean, this country's got its problems, right? And the problems we feel are something that as an American, we all patriotically want to work out, through processes. And there's a lot of bad dealings, bad actors, whatever. And the church, to a large degree, is the same exact thing, the same exact dynamic that's taking place. I mean, it's sort of our home. It's my home anyways. And what I'm seeing in the church is dismaying. The fact that these two sides are forming over these opinions on, vaccines and mandate. What was some of them here? Liberty of conscience and these type of things. Now, governance, charisma, and demagoguery, conscience, health, public health mandates, or vaccine mandates. And there was a lot of that going on. Now, I don't think the church should have taken the position of mandating vaccines, but I don't think Conrad Vine should have taken the position, or at least even mentioned the possibility of rediverting the tithes or starting a parachurch, because I think those were the two things that were contentious amongst the leaders of Bearing Springs and beyond. It's sort of a larger topic than just that's just what's taking place there in Bearing Springs. This is something that's actually, what I've seen, has sent shockwaves all across Adventism, probably nationwide, and people are starting to form their different sides. And from what I've read in the spirit of prophecy, there won't be another church. Now, okay, so we have to start from the beginning on this, because we have to really decide who the church is, for starters. And the church is those who are loyal to God, right? That ultimately makes up the body of those of the believers, of the true seed of Abraham, because Abraham was faithful, and all who follow after Abraham according to the Bible are his sons, his daughters. They're heirs to the throne. And so, and it began before that. I mean, you can take it all the way back to Adam. They had, two sons, Cain and Abel, and one was faithful and the other one wasn't. So these two bloodlines have pretty much gone down through history, and have, but they're becoming harder and harder to delineate between those two, at least up until the very end, when the wheat and the tares are separated, right? So what constitutes the church? So Israel constituted the church all through the ages, and I believe Israel is still the actual true name of the church. Now, you guys will often hear me say Seventh-day Adventist is the true religion, right? And I'll say that very boldly. I used to say it very timidly years ago, or not at all, in fear of upsetting somebody. But the more I read and the more I understand about the true church of God and its direction and who these people actually are, that's the answer I come up with, because no other church really fits the description of the true church, right? I mean, you have a lot of churches out there, and you have God's people in those churches, but they don't necessarily represent, the true church that constitutes Israel. In other words, you read the stories about the Syrian commander that had the Jewish slave that suggested that he go to the prophet to be healed from his leprosy. Now, when he left, after being dipped into the water 7 times, he was clean, and he said to the prophet that he would secretly worship the God of Israel when he was before, when he would bring his master before the temple of Dagon. And so, and did God accept that? Probably. I mean, that's where this guy was at in his mind. I mean, we know more is expected from us. Now, we can't really judge these situations, but it almost sounded like God was approving of what was taking place, especially, after the prophet had healed him. Now, so what I'm saying is there's other people that are true to God outside of the Seventh-day Adventist church. In fact, we're told in Spirit of Prophecy that the majority of God's people are outside of the church, and there are many in the church that are actually. Let's give this a shot. Can you hear me, Dallas? Okay, let me turn. Hang on a second.
All right.
There you are. I got you now. Go ahead.
All right. I just wanted to share a perspective on the church. I think there's 2 ways we can look at this. Church as a denomination, as a group of believers with a set of beliefs and an organization that governs them or whatever. I think you're absolutely right. The Seventh-day Adventist Church has a unique message. and that's the three angels message. It came up at a time right around the start of the investigative judgment, and the investigative judgment is a unique Seventh-day Adventist belief. That's what Christ is doing in the heavenly sanctuary right now. And he's reviewing the case of every single person who's ever said they believe in Jesus. All their names were put in the book of life, and he's now going through those names to see if they should remain in the book of life or not. When you think of church as a group of faithful believers, you're absolutely right. There are faithful in every denomination. There are faithful believers in Jesus who do not belong to a denomination. So right now, and Satan's going to attack anybody who believes in Jesus, whether they're part of a denomination. But right now, the denomination has been given the three angels message. That's been given the unique last message to the last age. Is the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and that church is under attack, and that's what's going on in Michigan. And it's an example of problems within the church on a wider scale, but they are confusing an awful lot of people over what should we be focused on. And Satan, I think, is using this disagreement over things that are not vital to our salvation as a distraction. And what I have found to be very interesting is that, hold on, I'm at work and just got a call.
Do you need to take that call, Dallas?
It's a text message. I need to text back.
Okay.
But I think we have to be very careful trying to determine, should we take a side? I appreciate what you started with. We shouldn't take a side. But in our minds, we are constantly searching for truth. And if we see enough people get excited about this, we may be asked about it and I don't know, be tempted to take a side. And I think what's key, because when I look at Ellen White's quotes that apply to this, that are being used, are both proponents of Ron Kelly being removed from his pastorate, or those who say he should not be removed, he should be able to remain there. These quotes from the Spirit of Prophecy and Bible text could be used by either side to support their argument. I really think this is starting to blur the line between truth and error. And we know at the end, truth is going to be called error, and error is going to be called truth. So I think this is an opportunity for us to try to determine, how do we judge? How do we decide what the best path to take in this, and then how are we going to discern between what's right and what's wrong?
Well, you're absolutely right. Look, this is one of those clever deceptions that's going to catch a lot of people off guard, because like you just mentioned, both sides can be supported through Bible, through Scripture, and that's the great, conundrum with what's going on, is that it's not really meant to extract truth through this division. It's only meant to divide, and that's Satan's ultimate goal. And he's very clever in these things, and we need to never lose focus of the actual purpose of what God has given us, and that's to preach the three angels' message to the whole world. And that message is going out. And Bering Springs was doing such a wonderful work. Why would not the devil attack it? It was becoming something that was food for everybody on a daily basis. Listening to Pastor Ron Kelly, Pastor Conrad Vine, or is he a pastor or is he just an elder? Probably elder. And all of the other great speakers that spoke from that pulpit, are they wrong? Are they right? Is the committee that removed them wrong or right? I mean, there's a lot of stake here on both sides. and and it's a terrible tragedy, I think, and there is, to me, there is no solution, because I see like points from both sides, like good points being made. I just wanted to read, if you don't mind, Northern Girl Hobbies. We do that here. I'm assuming you're a girl. She just tuned in. She says, "Good evening. Not sure how I found your channel. I'm not one to read the Bible, but I'm certainly open to listen." So, anti V here, okay, as I am as well, but not everybody in our church is, and that's been the discussion. There's been a lot of my close friends who have gotten, well, we'll call it the V. That's a great way to say it. And in the beginning, I was very opposed to these people, Northern Girl, and actually, almost militantly. And I was shown by God over time that what I was doing was the spirit of the devil, because the people who got the V, their conscience spoke to them in that way. And by me telling them that they couldn't would have violated their conscience. Them telling me that I had to violated my conscience. It was a very personal thing that people did based upon whatever knowledge they had. And both sides were passing knowledge back and forth, claiming the other side was stupid. And so it was a very divisive, very tricky thing that just took the soul from a lot of people. And so I think that's what's going on with this thing in Michigan. And I think more of these types of divisive things are going to start to take place as well. Kevin says, Luke 11:17, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and the house divided against a house falls. Yeah. And, I think that speaks to, are you still with me, Dallas?
Yes, I am.
I think that speaks to Satan's kingdom. What do you think? Satan's kingdom has to be divided amongst itself, and that's why you see so many different. It doesn't seem to be united. If you look around the world, everybody's fighting against everybody. And so I think he thrives on division. And so when I read about how and I actually watched the sermon where Conrad Vine spoke of maybe possibly reallocating the tithes. Now, he didn't outright say to, but he said if then we will, or maybe should suggest doing it this way. And that got the conference's attention. And then people said, well, of course you strike the conference where the money's at, and they would get upset because they're all about the money. And it took me a few days to think this through, and I thought, they should be all about the money. These are people who put their tithes and their offerings in, and in good faith that they would go towards a ministry. And there are a lot of ministries, probably thousands of ministries worldwide, that are supported through the tithes and the offerings, not to mention the pastors and the different churches being financed and the schools, and it's ongoing. It's a huge network of accountability for the monies that's given to the people in charge. And so for somebody to just come along and say, and we're not talking about anybody, all right? I could say the same thing Conrad did, and it would mean nothing, right? You guys would quickly probably refute what I had to say and set me straight, and I would have to agree because, especially if you guys brought up Bible quotes or whatever. But we're talking about a very charismatic individual that has a great deal of influence and is watched all over the world. And to say this, it could potentially be extremely damaging to God's work. So why would you not defend such a thing? So the criticism to me was unfair, that they should say, well, if you touch the money, then of course that's a sacred spot with the conference. I don't think the conference leaders are going to get paid any. I mean, what do you think, at Dallas? Would the conference leaders get paid any less if those plans were carried out. I mean, it's not like they're protecting their own salaries. They would get the same salary no matter what, wouldn't they?
Absolutely.
And so
their salaries are set, and it doesn't matter how much tithe is collected. They still get paid the same.
Yeah. And so the idea that somehow they're gleaning huge profits off of these tithes that are coming in is kind of an immature way of looking at how these tithes are dealt with. Now, I know when we would go and see the Adventist Church has always been very open and honest about where the monies go. Anybody can look into the books and study them and see where all the money's allocated. And sometimes we agree with where the money goes, and sometimes we don't. And that's our prerogative, I suppose. But these monies are sacred, and they are used for God's work. And I don't think it's up to one man, no matter how charismatic he might be, to. And we've seen charismatic people come in and destroy lives of people. And let's take it, for example, Jim Jones. And many have said after the fact, well, how can anybody follow Jim Jones? I'm not. Don't mistake what I'm saying here. I'm not likening Conrad Vine to Jim Jones. All I'm saying, I am making a point. Hey, Big Sky, he did wind up joining us. Give me a call, Aaron. Oh, I'm sorry, Dallas is on the line. Yeah, Aaron.
I can get off.
Aaron had something he wanted to say really quick. But you can.
Okay, I'll drop off.
Okay, thanks, Dallas.
All right.
All right, bye-bye for now. So, go ahead and give me a call, Aaron, and because Aaron's got a great way of putting things. Even though he doesn't necessarily agree with my positions always, he always at least is able to connect with where I'm thinking, and we try to do that with one another as well. Or I try to do it at least with his position on prophecy and how things are unfolding. And Watchman would be interested in some of the things that you guys would probably get along really good, because you guys align very much in some of your beliefs, especially with, the recent developments of Assyria and Damascus and what's going on over there, and Israel and the wars and all of that. Where was I at? So Jim Jones was a very charismatic leader. And I don't know if most people have been in the presence of somebody that was very charismatic, and they have this very influential way of persuading people. But we got Aaron on the line, so go ahead, Aaron.
How you doing, Kerry?
I'm doing great, man.
Well, I've delved through the Bible a couple times, cover to cover. And what I did notice in all of the New Testament and all Paul's writings towards the different churches that were established is that when there was sexual misbehavior or all these different misbehaviors, Paul instantly declared the church null and void and said it needed to be shut down.
So what you're saying is there's no evidence of actual churches being shut down because of maybe going astray. Or
am I wrong on that?
No.
So apparently Paul never espoused the churches to be shut down over the issues that they had. Paul was more about, hey, you guys need to fix this. Right?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. And so with Conrad Vine, and I get the whole idea. Now, Paul had a different type of church, too. You got to understand, his churches were home-based. They were local. And I know this is how you kind of believe that the church you belong to is an ecclesia. And I think the problem that the Seventh-day Adventist Church is having right now is a lot of the people in that church have become almost like our government. They've looked at the Seventh-day Adventist Church as the federal government rather than their local church. And when we do that, we end up putting the federal government above our state needs. And we start thinking that the federal government, the bigger government, is more powerful and more important. I think Paul's deal was all these churches are local, and the people within them need to resolve these problems, and here's the steps you take to resolve those problems. I think the Seventh-day Adventist Church, now I grew up in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, I have some issues with some of the doctrines, and I don't know that I have an issue with the doctrines ultimately, but I'm trying to get out of religion and develop a relationship and see where it falls. But I think that if you put the General Conference as the head of the church and not the buddy sitting next to you in the pew as the head of the church, you're going down the same route that the United States went. And I think that's a dangerous route to go down. And I think that your local church that you attend every Saturday is the Seventh-day Adventist Church for you. And if you don't agree with that, go to a different Seventh-day Adventist church with what's going on. But I think that the General Conference probably has its issues, but the only reason it has its issues is because it's been given that authority by the people. And if they just look at the guy sitting next to him in the pew, like you do, Carrie, I mean, you view everybody in your church as the Seventh-day Adventist Church, correct?
Yeah. I listen, it's easy for us to look at people and judge them, but we're told in Scripture to view others as better than yourself. So that's the mindset I usually try to go with. And my flesh doesn't always allow me to do that, so there's a struggle there, obviously. And but I try to recognize other people's struggles and where they're at as well. And so I try to be very fair when I look at people. I don't want to say, well, that person's not part of the church because they clearly don't believe, strongly enough in the message or whatever. I mean, did I make any sense when I said that?
No, it did. I'm trying to, what's coming through my earphones is not lining up with what I'm seeing on the screen, so it's kind of weird.
Oh yeah, you got to kind of look away and turn the volume down. There's some latency.
Right. No, I mean, I honestly believe you and I have had several phone conversations about this, and I ditched the church over a lot of reasons, and I didn't ditch them wholly. I ditched them because I needed to find out some truths for myself and not be indoctrinated. So I ditched every religion, and I just started reading the Bible. But while doing that, I did notice that every issue that a church could have, Paul addressed. Paul addressed every one of them. And this issue that's going on right now in the church, Paul addressed that. And you can find the answers to those issues in the Bible, right?
I think every issue that confronts man is searchable in the Bible if we look for it. If we look for the answers in man, we're going to be led astray, and that's the problem.
Yeah, but certainly when it comes to your church issues, Paul is writing those letters to the churches.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%. And right, and all the problems that you have in the Seventh-day Adventist Church right now, they're written about in the New Testament. And I think that a lot of people, but never once in there did Paul ever say, you guys ditch the church and start something new. I don't think he ever said that.
No.
I could be wrong.
No, that's correct. Well, and in Israel, when God had to make corrections with even Israel, he made his corrections. And folks, I want you guys to all know that Aaron is speaking on my behalf, not necessarily what he believes. That's what I love about Aaron. He's actually able to not only meet me and be a good opponent in a discussion, but also meet me where I'm at and what I'm trying to explain, and actually explain it sometimes better than I can explain it. So,
well, now wait a minute, Kerry. Now you've turned me. I've had some views on the Bible, and you've talked to me about it. You know, this isn't me. I'm not arguing your point. I am. I'm trying to figure out what my relationship with God is.
Fair enough.
And I have listened to other people and have wandered down some paths that some are right, that oppose yours. And there's some that I've wandered down that are wrong. And you've reeled me back from those. And this is one that you've reeled me back from.
Okay.
And that's why I'm here.
You know,
on the whole abandonment of your church and your faith over what the general conference is doing, that's not biblical.
And the funny thing about, you know, especially the way we talk, Aaron, because we've been talking for years, and we used to get, you know, we're more mature now than we were, you know, 10 years ago. And so we've learned a lot through those processes. And I think as long as people are making headway, then they're doing well. But, you know, what happened to the old discussions that people used to have, and they used to grind it out, go to the Bible, come back and grind it out again, go to the Bible, come back and grind it out again. And you notice each time you go to the Bible and come back, you're a little closer. And, you know, and humility plays a big part in this too, because I've had to concede to a few of your points as well. And, you know, so, you know, if the Bible says it, we have to believe it, you know, irregardless. And sometimes our view of what the Bible is trying to say to us isn't the same as what's going to be 10 years later. You know, we're going to see things in there that that we didn't see before. Watchman says you can't bring any denomination with you. It's heaven, you, and Christ. No, but what we're talking about here, Watchman, and I think Aaron will agree here, is what does the remnant look like? What does God's people look like? Did he have a remnant all throughout history? Now, we all agree that was Israel in the past, and then it became the early church. And I argue that Israel and the early church were one of the very same. But instead of a ministry, a sanctuary ministry that involved the sacrifice of animals, that of course changed. And then after Christ died, he became the sacrifice. I mean, most Christians understand the fundamentals of how all that worked. Whereas a lot of the followers of Christ continued with the sacrifices, and you know, I know some watching here will disagree with what I'm saying. That's fine, but they discontinued the sacrifices, and others continued to do it, and thus splitting off. And I believe, you know, the split that, as we're admonished by Paul himself in Galatians and other places, that those ceremonies were, you know, essentially nailed to the cross, that they were fulfilled, so we don't do them anymore. So, the remnant is most likely working these chats. I agree with that, Watchman. And people outside of the tech that is here now seem to be keep up with the latest current events. And let me see.
All right, I got to go, Kerry. You have a good evening, and you take care of yourself. I love you, brother.
Hey, love you too, Aaron. You have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye. All right, so Trish in Progress says, oh, look at the Orthodox Church, talk about judgmental. Are you talking about the Orthodox Catholics? Just curious. But But so yeah, we've had with Aaron's input, and that's a good point. About Paul never told people to leave the church. He told them to fix their problems, and it is unfortunate that we've had such a powerhouse of preaching that came out of Bering Springs, Michigan, and to be disrupted by the devil. And honestly, all of us, any believer, should be praying for that church, for that congregation, for Patrick Kelly, for Conrad Vine as well. I don't eat any meat of any kind. I don't kill anything, but that's my personal choice. And is that a dietary? I'm just curious, Trish, because we were talking about that last week. About the dietary requirements that God has put forth to us. Is that just a personal? Okay, you say it's a personal choice. I mean, is that just something from health, or is that just something because you don't believe in the killing of animals? I mean, there's a lot of different reasons why people are vegetarians. I personally am a vegetarian, so I'm always wondering. Orthodox Christianity, I converted in 2002. Okay. Are you from America, or are you in a different country? That's not a church that you hear of very often. Watchman says a church more than likely usually will tell you to leave because they don't want to hear the truth. And that's another thing. Now, there are instances where the church is right in asking people to leave. And this is not an easy thing, probably, that I am qualified to talk about, really. But God has appointed leaders. He has given them authority on earth. He said, whatsoever is bound up on earth shall be bound up in heaven. That's why Northern Hobbies agree with the caller. So, yes, and I do too. I agree with probably 95% of what Aaron and I talk about. He's very articulate in what he says. But there are times when people do have to be removed from the church books. I remember years ago, and I got to say this carefully because some of these people that I talk about could watch one of my videos at some point or another, so I got to be careful with details and whatnot. But this individual was an elder in the church. He was given Bible studies, and there was this one young lady that happened to need Bible studies, and this individual normally would go with another person, but on a particular day he went by himself, and he was married. She was not. She was single, and they began a relationship, and one thing led to another, and some very tragic things happened as a result of all of that. And this individual was removed from the church books as an elder. He was no longer allowed to be an elder. He was, in fact, removed from the registry, where he was no longer even a member of the church. Now, he was still allowed to come to church, but he had to go through a process, much like the process there that you read of what took place with infidelity. Well, it was actually, what was it, Romans? Corinthians? Probably, I think it's in Corinthians where Paul came and had to condemn somebody for their behavior. And I think it was his mother-in-law or something that he was in this relationship with, something that, it was kind of like an extramarital thing or something. He condemned how was taking place. They removed him from the books. And later on, this man saw his error and then came back into the church, repented, okay, let's say. So let me see here. Trish in Progress says, converted for my husband, but they are so judgmental. And she also says, concerning the animals, nope, I saw the cruelty, I can't do it. And that's not a bad reason, because I do believe that God's people are, now, another big topic, we know there's people in the world that have to eat animal products, right, to be able to survive. Mankind, or people's lives is more important than animal life. So if it's a choice between an animal and a person, the animal has to be sacrificed for food for people. But in the case of America, where we have, a very cruel system that, and I don't want to go too far into that, because that's not why I'm a vegetarian. I'm a vegetarian for other reasons, but that is a valid reason to be a vegetarian, is to not support the industry, because the industry is well, quite frankly, a little out of control. I feed my pets meat, but I will never eat it, and do not judge others for their choice, and neither do I. And so, I mean, it is one of those personal things, and eating meat is not a sin. And so, we covered enough of that last week. But so anyways, this elder was actually removed from the church books, and he was later reinstated after having gone through the baptismal class again, and so through that process he was repatriated. But then I don't think they allowed him to be an elder again at that church. There was just certain duties that he was not allowed to have because of his past actions. Trish, I don't think it is a salvation issue, but how you get the meat is, I believe. Okay, yeah. But going back to the charismatic leaders, okay, so Jim Jones was a very charismatic leader, and if anybody's been around charismatic people, they know what I'm talking about, how they have this ability to, when they walk into the room, they have a presence, and everybody's eyes are on them. Some people I can walk in a room and nobody knows I'm even there. I can walk in and walk out, and I have no influence on what's going around, with any kind of discussion or any kind of, people could be talking about whatever. And then I could come and leave and nobody would even know I'm there. Kerry, don't eat meat because he took it too far and tried to eat his arm. So he decided needed to quit his meat consumption. That's pretty funny, Aaron. No, I used to be a big meat eater. I used to be a big hunter, and I used to hunt a lot and fish a lot, and I still do a little fishing. Maybe once or twice a year I'll fish. I'll catch a trout or two, and we'll take it home and we'll smoke it and we'll eat it, and it's very, very good. But we typically don't eat any meat, really. But a charismatic leader is one that can really sway church opinion through their influences over people. And I know I invited him on the program, and of course there wouldn't be any reason why he would come on the program. There's nothing for him to really gain from it, only to lose. But I reached out multiple times to Conrad Vine. I have spoke to him on the phone before, several times. And I know a lot of the people who are in close contact with him. And so I thought that maybe he might come on to the show and be able to give his perspective of what is actually taking place and have a fair conversation with him. I'd ask him some tough questions, et cetera, et cetera. But he, not knowing my intentions, I'm sure, just kind of ignored me. But, I would like to talk to him in a personal way, maybe even Pastor Ron Kelly. I said Patrick Kelly earlier. It's Ron Kelly. And there's an author of a book. His name is Patrick Kelly. I just popped in my head when I was saying his name. But I'm sort of losing my train of thought here. Too many things going on at once. But I've tried to cover too many topics, at once. But yeah, so he declined. He had nothing really to gain from it, but it would be nice to have him on here. Now, I know from speaking to other people, that know him very well, that he is very charismatic, and he does command an audience. And that's, a lot of what the problem is here is charismatic people, the overall crowd tends to listen to them, and regardless of what they say. And, I used to do this a lot. When I used to listen to Doug Batchelor, especially as a young Christian, Doug Batchelor's like the pastor, the preacher for all young Christians, because that's the first, whenever you come into Adventism, he's the first face you see. And that was the first face I saw. And he would give these sermons, and they just were so simple to understand and so elementary. And he just spoke so well. And Doug Batchelor is very charismatic, but I believe he's used it in a good way. You know, there's been some that have criticized him, but I think unfairly. But so he has this way of speaking to people that you know, of those who are coming into the church. And of course, I just lost my train of thought again. I don't know what's going on with my head. I'm just all over the place for some reason. But anyways, the purpose of the church is to preach the three angels' message. And that is outlined in Revelation 14. Let's look it up real quick, guys. I might have to go through an ad on my phone. Lately, just tons of ads on my Bible app. Okay, not today, though. I had it opened up earlier today, so. All right. So let's check this out. All right, so we're going to Revelation 14. Let's just read about the three angels' message. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation, kindred, and tongue, and people. And so this is a very special message for God's in-day church to preach to the world. It's an everlasting gospel, and that's a very specific type of a gospel, right? Now, people have said the gospel of Jesus Christ is thus and thus and thus. It's this simple. Jesus died for our sin, and all who call on his name will be saved. And that is certainly part of the everlasting gospel, but there is also more to it, and it spells it out right here. And there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city. And because she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And we've talked about, you know, Babylon a little bit, and but here it says is fallen. It says it twice, you know. Now, most people know that the original Babylon exists over there somewhere in Iran, right? And it was once a great city. Now, many people used to say that the Bible was untrue because it named a city called Babylon that hadn't been discovered yet. But indeed, it has been indeed discovered. And in fact, it said it would never be rebuilt again, that jackals the owls would fill its palaces, and the jackals would inhabit it, and then it would be an accursed city. And in fact, to this day, the shepherds don't even pitch their tents there because it's they considered it an accursed city. And I remember watching a documentary on it one time, and they panned across the horizon of Babylon, and off went a jackal running across the ruins. Literally fulfilled to the T. So if Babylon was never going to be rebuilt, what's this Babylon that it's speaking of in the future? What's this Babylon, this system of Babylon, you know? And we've said it before here, the word Bab-El is a composite word meaning the door to God. Bab, door, El is the universal word for God. And so Babylon is the city of the door to God. And that was a very specific name given it to it then, but it is very descriptive of what's taken place in the last days, because the religion of today, thank you, Aaron, you corrected me. Babylon is in Iraq, not Iran. Okay, so thanks for that correction. And there's a very specific message, or there's a very specific religion out there that's teaching these teachings of Babylon, okay? Now, the Babylonian god was Dagon, right? And he was the fish god. They would wear these mitres that looked like a fish with the open mouth at the top, and they would wear this tail that came down behind them. And the idea is that Dagon was half fish and half man. And the religion of Babylon was one of sacrifice, child sacrifice. Okay, now listen closely. We're not going to get too deep into this stuff. Watchmen reiterated. Thank you guys. You guys are watching me closely. That's good. But child sacrifice, now where do we see child sacrifice today? Maybe not exactly like they did it in Babylon, but sacrifice is sacrifice nonetheless, you know. And so there's also, incense being burnt in the temple. There was it kind of almost mirrored Christianity back then in some ways, but not quite. It was a different version of it. It was very close, but not quite, right? And we see the same thing now today. And it says, because she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. We said before that wine is doctrine, and they've become drunk with this doctrine, right? And the fornication is having other gods, not the God, but a different God. And, we're told that in Revelation that a people would rise that were called out of Babylon, out of the system of Babylon. So God's got his people in Babylon, interestingly enough, but they're being called out into something else. And they're being called out of Babylon to actually keep God's commandments. Now, that's an interesting perspective on this, because if people in Babylon are being called out to come in and keep God's commandment, then that must mean that those in Babylon are breaking God's commandments, right? Namely, a specific one. I bet you guys can probably guess which one. And because you don't have to break all the commandments, right? It says if we offend in one, we have offended in all. But they have done ignorantly so. Many of these people in Babylon are doing so ignorantly. They're not doing so on purpose. And when they hear God's voice, they respond to God. Because it says, my sheep will hear my voice and they will follow me. And it says here in verse 9, that, and a third angel followed, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship, that's a key word here that we've heard many times in the book of Revelation, worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in the forehead or in his hand. Now, if you look in Deuteronomy, the forehead and the hand is symbolic. It's significant. It's the actions, it's the thought. And if you read in Deuteronomy there, I'll probably get the text and put them in the description below, or maybe one of you guys online can hand it over. But when God bound up his law with his people, he said, they will be as frontlets between thine eyes. I shall bind them upon thine hand. Okay, the hand and the forehead. And that was God's law. So God's law and the hand and the forehead go hand in hand. So Babylon, if they're being called out of Babylon to keep the commandments, and the mark is on the hand and the forehead, something that symbolizes either keeping or breaking the commandments, then you can reason that the mark has something to do with the commandments of God, right? And if any man worship the beast in his image and receive the mark in his forehead or in his hand, okay, and if that's with a loud voice. So this voice is going to go all over the world. It's a message to the whole world. And it says here in verse 10 that the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. Now, there's the word wine again. That's doctrine. But God's doctrine is everlasting. It's the everlasting doctrine. It's one that when God says something, it's fulfilled always. And that's actually what we read in the Bible. There are judgments given to those who will receive the mark of the beast. Let me see. Neuralink, a brain chip, could also be a master chip, and the rest become followers when they join, like Satan and his minions. There's been a lot of speculation on what this mark of the beast would actually be, but now remember, it says that those who have the mark of the beast have no rest day or night, right? And so there's only one place in the Bible where it talks about rest, and that's the fourth commandment. And so this is specifically talking about, again, God's commandments, specifically one that Babylon doesn't keep, because 9 of them are okay. It's just that fourth commandment that's the hang-up. And it says, which is poured out with mixture into the cup of his indignation, and he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascended up forever and ever, and they have no rest. There's what I just quoted there, day or night, who worship the beast and his image, and whoever receiveth the mark of his name. In other words, they don't have any Sabbath. They don't have any Sabbath who worship the beast and or his image. There was an image that was made unto the beast. What was that image? We've spoke about that before. Here's the patience of the saints. Here's it. You could forget everything else. Here's the takeaway of what just got through being said. Here's the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus. Now, there's 2 points there, the commandments and the faith. What is the mark exactly? Is it figurative or is it literal? Well, I would say it's both, Trish, because the mark, I'll just say it plainly, the mark is Sunday sacredness. It's the breaking of God's specific commandment of the fourth commandment. Now, that mark is not put on people today. It will be in the future. In other words, those who are keeping the Sunday are still in Babylon and are being called out, right? And just reading some of these comments here. You guys are still on the vegetarian thing. We should have had that discussion today and then had this discussion last week, right? So, but you guys probably watched the last week's and we're like, okay, I got something to say about that. So, and I was told not to use the word vegan because vegan's like one of those words, you know, you see the vegans in the restaurant. Yeah, vegan is evil. So actually Aaron's the one that told me, don't use the word vegan because it's like, it's what people who are calling themselves vegans are like literally going into restaurants and slapping chicken sandwiches out of people's hands and stuff. So, in order to not be mistaken as aligning with that ideology, we're going to call ourselves vegetarian. So how about that? But no. So, and here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus. Now we know that much of Christendom has broken the fourth commandment unwittingly, ignorantly, not knowing, because during the Dark Ages, the Bible was taken from people. And then we saw the reformers through the ages slowly relearn what the Bible was saying. You know, Martin Luther learned about grace. You learn some of the other reformers, and I don't know all of the different points of the different reformers, but you know, the Baptists, the father of the Baptists, he learned, which is who? Wasn't Calvin, was it? Was Calvin the father of the Baptist Church? Or he was the father of the doctrine of what's that? Where God chooses people. It's that one word, I can't think of it. But the Baptists learned about the baptism, you know, because the Catholic Church was actually immersing little babies, and that was incorrect. But many people thought that was correct. And God says that he would wink at the people's ignorance. But in these last days, we would all learn of the actual truth of God and what it would mean. And so, let me see if there's any more here I want to talk about in the 14th chapter. So yeah, so Revelation 14 is just a small snapshot of many verses that come before it. No, I don't do that. I feed my pets meat, but but you can't pay me to eat it. I just won't. Bless your heart, Trish. They already took the mark, in my opinion. Well, listen, the mark is applied to those who have set their heart on doing that which is not of thus saith the Lord, okay? And that could be any of the commandments, you know, but specifically the fourth, because that's the one that Christendom has largely rejected. And those who have already made up their minds and set their hearts, they are sealed. That's what that means. They have sealed their fate, right? You've heard that the way it, you know, it being said like that. And those who have decided and made up their mind and aren't going to be convinced one way or another are in fact sealed. Now God's people can be sealed too. They can make up their mind in that same fashion. They can say in their heart, I will follow God and nothing will part me from the truth of God. Nothing will sway me from walking in Jesus's footsteps, right? And that is in and of itself a sealing, okay? And so when the whole world has decided, then the whole world has been sealed. And so the mark of the beast and the seal are kind of almost synonymous, right? Because the mark of the beast is a seal that's placed on those who are disobedient, and the seal of God is placed on those who are obedient. It's really it's a very simple equation. Either you're obedient or you're not obedient. Either you keep the commandments of God or you don't. And some have said, well, the commandments are legalism. If you keep the commandments, it's legalism. You know, and some pastors have even said that keeping the Sabbath is, you know, you're making the people to work. You know, that's righteousness by works. So you're telling me that if you are told to rest and you rest by God, that's righteousness by works. Okay, that doesn't make sense, but it's been suggested. You know what I'm saying? But now we're coming into an age very quickly where the the devil is going to begin to enforce this Sunday sacredness, this Sunday edict. And we're going to talk about that more and more in the future in upcoming in upcoming broadcasts, because this is a large subject, and it there's a lot to it, right? It's not a simple one-off. And actually, speaking of Doug Batchelor, there is a lot that if any of you guys want to know more about it, he has some very detailed sermons on this. You can find them online on YouTube pretty easily nowadays. In the old days we used to have to pass out DVDs. But he's got some very basic information on all of that stuff if you're new to the to this particular discussion. Okay, hold on, you guys. Break one commandment, you break them all, Carrie. You can keep all the Sabbaths and yet covet your neighbor's Ferrari Z36 stand on the mower, and you broke the Sabbath as much as you coveted your. Okay, well, and that's right. And the mark of the beast, I think, is more than just the Sabbath. It's about the commandments of God. It's really about just following God or not following God. It's really that simple. Heaven Sue says their next move after trying to find Vine will be offering money and position or bribes for him to recant, according to GC. I believe page 606, 607. Wow, Heaven Soon. Man, you probably gave us the topic of our next discussion. That is interesting. I'll have to check out that. And we will all have to answer one day. It's between God and me. He knows what I did. Yes, and that's, there is a corporate punishment. If you read the Bible, there is a corporate punishment for God's church, right? And then there's an individual punishment or reward, if you will. And the important thing is that we do have that personal relationship, and all of our decisions that we make today are very important because we're judged according to our works, as it says. So, and I got an amen from Mr. Bruce himself. So the commandments are all inclusive, and that's correct. Excuse me very much. So, all right, folks, we're 7 minutes over. Thank you so much for watching. Catch us next week on the live Wednesday at 6 o'clock Mountain Time. Don't forget to catch us on Sabbath School every Sabbath, every Saturday at 9 o'clock Mountain Time as well. We come on live, and then we'll have a midweek prophecy update upload as well. So you guys, I have uploaded the very recent prophecy update, so I'm going to make that live here in a minute. I'm working with a fella who's trying to help the channel out, so I'm kind of waiting on him as well. So, but thanks again for watching. God bless each and every one of you. The Great Controversy, we're still handing that out. All we need is your guys' address. You can mail that to, or you can give that to us at prophecymontana@gmail.com. You can give us your address. We'll send you a book for free. Great Controversy, an absolutely amazing book. And so I'm kind of waiting on him as well. Hey, but thanks again for watching. God bless
you.
Dude, we're still online.
The Great Controversy.
Oh, my bad. I'll call you later.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
How funny. I suspected he was going to catch me like that. So.